A nonprofit has been fighting a university for decades to help preserve the oldest Jewish orphanage in the United States. I've published an article on my Substack about the rise and fall of orphan asylums, link in description, but this story is one for the books. And to help me tell its tale is the executive director of Baltimore Heritage, who has been on the ground with this building since this fight began. This is Madeline Feierstein, a trained historian and criminologist, and this is Rooted in Place, where even the darkest places can shed light. The Hebrew Orphan Asylum in Baltimore, Maryland is the oldest standing Jewish orphanage in the country. The history of the development at this site began in 1815 with the construction of Calverton, the country home of banker Dennis Smith. Smith declared bankruptcy by 1820, and Baltimore City/Baltimore County at the time purchased the property from him. The city transformed it into a local almshouse. Now, the original Calverton estate had over 300 acres, but the county sold off a lot of it since they did not need it for the local madhouse and asylum. Calverton featured a central mansion for caretakers, large wings on either side for male and female dormitories, and a lunatic asylum. The almshouse operated until 1866, when the Bayview Asylum opened its doors, and all those residents/patients were transferred out. That Bayview Asylum eventually became part of the Johns Hopkins University campus, and it now serves as Bayview Hospital. In 1866, the property was divided into 3 separate lots and sold. One of those lots caught the eye of William Rayner. Rayner himself was an orphan and a Jewish immigrant from Germany. He was the first president of the Hebrew Benevolent Society, which is a charitable organization in Baltimore. The society decided to open an asylum for the city's Jewish orphans. They raised $18,000 in just a few weeks, the equivalent of over $480,000 today. Now, this asylum did not have any endowments, so all of the funding came from donations from the local community. Coinciding with the orphanage's founding, there was a boom in charitable organizations for the Jewish community in Baltimore, including the Hebrew Hospital in 1866, Free Burial Society in 1867, the Friendly Inn and Aged Home in 1890, and the Immigrant Aid Society, also in 1890, just to name a few. The city of Baltimore also experienced a big boom in orphanages. 28 orphanages were founded by 1910 in the city. Now, the Hebrew Orphan Asylum was officially dedicated in May of 1873. It was built to accommodate 150 wards, but it opened with just 8 boys and 5 girls. Now, unfortunately, the next year, in 1874, there was a fire. They decided to rebuild the building on the same site. So what you see today is the circa 1875-1876 building, but it stood on the same grounds of the original orphan asylum. Now, each room in the asylum slept between 7 and 8 children. There were playgrounds, classrooms, gymnasium, chapel, large kitchen, and dining rooms. There was also a separate apartment for the superintendent in the building. The gardens grew an array of herbs and vegetables, and by 1914, electric lights illuminated the building. When streetcars were installed in this neighborhood around the year 1900, this brought more doctors, nurses, and workers to the asylum doorstep. Now, what's interesting about this orphanage compared to maybe some other Jewish orphanages is that it was not kosher. This orphanage did not follow the dietary laws of the Jewish faith. Now, most children to this asylum were dropped off voluntarily by their parents, but very few of the children at this asylum were court ordered. But most of the time, what we're seeing here is parents temporarily leaving their children at the asylum for one reason or another. Now, in 1923, the orphan asylum merged with the Jewish Children's Bureau and it moved its location to the Bureau. The building then started to serve as the West Baltimore General Hospital until 1949. And then another change. Around 1950, it became the Lutheran Hospital of Maryland, which acquired over 360 staff members from the West Baltimore General. And the Lutheran Hospital remained in use until 1989. The original Hebrew Orphan Asylum building, which still stands today, had been vacant since 1989, and it has been owned by Coppin State University since 2003. While I could go on about the preservation battle that ensued, why don't you hear about it from someone who's been on the front lines nearly as long as I've been alive? I sat down with Johns Hopkins, Executive Director of Baltimore Heritage, who partnered with the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation to help save this historic orphanage from demolition. So thank you so much for joining me on this video today. Would you mind introducing yourself and also giving our viewers a little bit of the purpose and mission of Baltimore Heritage?
Sure. My name's John Hopkins, and I'm the director of Baltimore Heritage. We're a nonprofit organization in Baltimore, and we work to try to use history and heritage to make our city a better place.
Wonderful, wonderful. So with the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, how did Baltimore Heritage get involved in this project?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's been it still is ongoing, but that has been an incredible saga. 20 years, I think, and counting. We got involved. I've been at Baltimore Heritage since 2003, and it was shortly after I arrived that we learned that the University of Maryland planned to demolish the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, the nation's oldest still standing Jewish orphanage, and which is a whole history in and of itself, and been deeply rooted in the historic neighborhood that it's in West Baltimore for 100 years. And so we sort of said, "Oh my goodness, what can we do to try to help neighbors prevent this demolition from happening?" And so that's kind of how it started. We started, kind of gearing up for advocacy, and the University of Maryland was determined to take it down. It belonged, past tense, to the university system. Coppin State University, part of the University of Maryland system, was planning a sort of a satellite campus from their main. It's about a mile away from their main campus. So that was the kind of overall plan. But we started, after about a year or two, a gentleman named Gary Rodwell fell from heaven into this neighborhood and with us. He became the head of the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation, a very local grassroots group committed to working with neighbors in the Coppin Heights neighborhood, which is where the building is, to set of neighborhoods to do this. And he immediately said, I think this is a great building. Let's try to do something." And so that began a partnership that is again 20 some years and running. We did. We were. I will say it was a pretty daunting challenge. The University of Maryland, we learned later, had in living memory, had never, what do they call it, deaccessioned a building, had never sold a
Wow.
building, at least that anybody could remember. And we were asking them to scrap their plans for a satellite campus and sell the building to this local community development corporation.
Wow.
One of the first things we did was enroll. There was the National Trust for Historic Preservation had a campaign, "This Place Matters," and they actually had a campaign with prize money for. This was kind of back when social media. It's kind of hard to imagine, but back then social media was kind of new, and there
Yeah,
were contests going on, like vote for your neighbor's dog and the
right.
favorite dog contest. Well, the National Trust had a favorite building contest, and so we entered the Hebrew Orphan Asylum in it, and we
Mhm.
got several thousand people to log on to the website and vote for it. We didn't win. I think Historic Theater, if I remember correctly, in Kentucky, won. Uh,
Darn.
but I think it was an unfair competition because they
Yeah.
were still a working movie theater, and before
Oh,
every
yeah.
show they
It's
had a
rigged.
they ran this little thing like vote for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Oh.
we didn't win, but we got a lot of positive publicity.
Mhm.
Um, we were able to begin a partnership with the Jewish Museum of Maryland
Oh, yeah.
and their archives, and in particular, a woman, Deb Weiner,
Mhm.
who helped tremendously. And then we kept rolling, and even though we didn't win, we kept pushing back and pushing back and pushing
Mhm.
back. And eventually, Coppin State University got a new president who was willing to listen. And we began the sort of the seas changed, or the tide changed, and we began working cooperatively to try to figure out a way to um, keep this building standing and get it into the hands of the local community development corporation. And sort of long story short, we that was successful. Even though the lawyers at the University of Maryland kind of had to invent the wheel because they had never had to sell a building before.
Right,
So
right.
that was kind of fun. But that was kind of like one part of the
Uh-huh.
saga.
Yeah.
Other sort of notable chapters, and there were a lot of notable chapters. The CDC director Gary Rodwell and I spent years and years meeting with banks, meeting with
Mm.
foundations, trying to line up financing. Would think would have it, and then everything would fall through. And that happened for about 10 years, I want to say. We were always at the final step, and then the whole thing would fall through and start back over again.
Hmm.
Along the way, a couple crazy things happened. I think it was the year 2011. There was an earthquake, I think centered
Yes,
somewhere in outside of like Richmond, Virginia.
I remember that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we don't have earthquakes.
No.
This is Baltimore. We're not San Francisco,
Yeah.
but we had an earthquake that like really shook buildings in Baltimore, and sure enough, it shook part of a wall down
Oh.
at the Hebrew Orphan Asylum. So that was kind of like, oh my goodness gracious. And we had put a temporary roof on.
Mhm.
A couple years later, we had put a temporary roof on, and we had a freak windstorm that ripped off one of the metal panels. They were big sort of sheets of metal.
No.
Yeah, ripped off one of the metal panels and decapitated a Volkswagen Bug that was parked on the street. So the total project cost was came in at something like $19 million plus the replacement of a Volkswagen
A
Bug.
casualty.
Yeah, for
Oh.
this poor neighbor who came out and said, "What happened to my car?" Um,
Wow.
but yeah, we eventually were able to raise the funding, and I do want to share one thing that I think is just really tremendous.
Mhm.
The question, of course, with projects is, well, who's going to use it? What's going to
Mhm.
happen to it? You don't just save a building and
Yeah.
then put it in shrink wrap and you're done.
Mhm.
Um, and at the this was I'm going to get my dates wrong, but this was probably now about 2000. I don't know, 17, 2018. So we've been at it now probably 12, 13 years already.
Mhm.
And there was a group out of San Francisco that had pioneered a technique for part of drug treatment, and they call it a sobering up center, and the idea, and I'm speaking sort of outside my expertise, but the idea is that if somebody needs immediate attention, the sort of first step is to have a safe space to sober up.
Right.
Um, Not a methadone clinic. People don't walk up and it's not a methadone clinic. But this
Mhm.
group out of San Francisco wanted to sort of start a second one of these facilities in the Baltimore area, and they
Uh-huh.
went to something like over a dozen communities, and every community said, "Not here. We don't
Yeah.
want you here. Go away."
Hmm.
And they came to Greater Rosemont, the neighborhood where the Hebrew Orphan Asylum is, and the neighbors in Greater Rosemont said, "Well, like we'll listen to you at
Uh-huh.
least." And so they listened to the concept, and then again with Gary Rodwell and the Copenhagen CDC, we were able to fly a group of neighbors out to San Francisco for a
Mhm.
whirlwind weekend, 36 hours to see this sobering up center and how it operated. And when they came back, they had a bunch of neighborhood meetings. And I think to their unbelievable credit, the neighborhood came out and said, "We're not just okay with this. We want this.
Oh, good.
The
Yeah.
drug epidemic
Yeah.
is all of our problems.
Hmm.
It's our problem too, and we all need to be part of the solution." So the neighborhood was instrumental in helping really lobby for some legislative changes to allow this drug treatment facility to come in and operate. So now the ground floor of the nation's oldest Jewish orphanage, which operated as a community center, and then when orphanages were sort of fell by the wayside
Uh-huh.
for foster care in the 1920s, and that's a whole nother
Yeah.
history. But the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, the building became a hospital. It was the Lutheran hospital for a long time. Had an
Hmm.
incredible maternity ward. I think
Wow.
when I over the last 20 years that I've been walking around that neighborhood, working on the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, almost every time somebody stops me on the street and says, I was born there, my
Yeah.
mother was born there, I have a cousin who was born there, like,
Yeah.
so just half of West Baltimore, I think, was born
Yeah.
in this building has had a long, long history of being a core part of the community and being a health care center. And so now,
Yes.
again, 150 years later, it
Yep.
is again a core part of the community as a healthcare center. So really, it's
Yes. This is
to
like
the
the
neighbors.
ideal situation. This is like
Yeah,
perfect to bring it back to its original purpose of helping people. I mean, we see these
exactly.
buildings often become apartments, or I was just at a former prison site that is now a luxury apartment complex, and it's very weird.
Oh, is that Lorton,
It is
Virginia?
Lorton,
Yeah,
yes. I was just,
yeah.
it's really cool that they kept a lot of the original structure, but it's
The
also a little
same
weird.
contractors
Yeah.
that were part of that were the lead contractors at the Hebrew Orphan
Oh,
Asylum.
the Alexander Company?
Yeah, it was at
Yeah.
Southway Builders, who I'm pretty sure was part of that
Yeah, no, they're
bigger group.
amazing. They've done a lot of great buildings.
Yeah,
Speaking of the structure itself, though, the whole outer shell is maintained, right? The
yeah,
kind of the
yeah.
outer structure of it.
So if you look at a picture of it, I don't know if you show pictures on your podcast,
I
but it's
will. Yeah.
a center, a big center, and then two wings on either side. And the sort of physical, the main physical issue is the center had a wonderful skylight at the top that had failed. The building sat vacant for about 20 years, and the skylight had failed. So the whole center core of the building had been exposed to every bit of weather for 20 plus years, held up by scaffolding,
Uh-huh.
really for most of that time. And I remember asking the head of Southway Builders, a guy named Willie Moore. We were out there, and they had taken down the scaffolding and sort of cleaned things up. And we were standing in the middle of this just four walls of brick with nothing, no supports. And I
Mhm.
asked Willie, I said, Willie, how is this still
Yeah.
standing? And he looked at me seriously and he said, memory. That's the only thing that's keeping this up, memory.
Yep.
And but we were able to build back the structural supports and keep that center in all of its glory. So not only the outside is preserved, but much of the two wings on the inside are preserved. And then that center core, while it lost all of the floors between it, is preserved and then rebuilt in a way that's consistent with what it was historically.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, even though it's a shell of it, to keep that is miraculous. So you don't have these ugly modern additions to it. You can
Yeah,
keep
no,
it's the same thing.
there's no addition at all.
Perfect. Now, the community has responded, of course, very well to the fact that this has become a drug treatment center. Um, are they also happy that the original structure is maintained? Because you said a lot of them have a personal connection to that site. Has the response been relatively positive about not modernizing it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's again, if you look at that building,
Mhm.
I mean, it is a landmark in kind of every sense of the word. It is big. It's on a hill.
Uh-huh.
It's a visual cue for blocks and blocks and blocks
Mhm.
around. Again, it was at the center of a number of neighborhoods in West Baltimore, so people would always be going there or coming back or have somebody who's coming or going. So really, kind of in every sense of the word landmark. And almost universally, when people would stop me on the street and they'd say, "What's like I was born there, my cousin was born there. What's happening with that building? It's a
Uh-huh.
shame that it's vacant. Can't there's some isn't there something that can be done about that?"
Mhm.
And so I think in a lot of ways the community, and it really, I want to emphasize again that this was a community-driven effort. This was not a Baltimore Heritage-driven effort. This was a Coppin Heights, Greater Rosemont community-driven effort. And I think folks, I don't know if they're the folks I know are kind of humble, so they might not say it quite like this, but they're pretty proud of what they did. They took a vacant building that was about to be demolished,
Uh,
fought for 20 years to not just get the building there, but to get new investment in a part of Baltimore City that hadn't seen new investment in probably generations,
right.
and turn things around. So
Yep.
yeah, I think there's rightfully a good bit of pride in
I would be
what's going
too.
on there.
Yeah.
On the upper floor is now the Baltimore Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods has its headquarters there. So
Oh,
there's again another very much community centered organization
yes.
on the top, and then the drug treatment community centered organization on the lower levels. So it's got
Yes.
two fabulous uses.
Oh, that's such a great outcome. Now,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we consider this project as part of Baltimore Heritage's role in it? Is it a complete project? Are you guys still working with it, or are we kind of ending
It,
it in
it's
Baltimore?
it's as complete as I think I've ever
Yeah.
gotten on a project. So, there's the Coppenites CDC Community Development Corporation owns it, and so one of the really tremendous things about the Coppenites CDC, and to be totally transparent, I'm on the board of the
Okay,
CDC,
yeah.
so part of this saga has been me
Yeah.
joining their board. But so part of the goal from the very beginning was to take this building and turn it into a community asset.
Hmm.
And those are words that you hear a lot. And how it played out in this case was there were a number over the years that we were trying to find financing. There were a number of groups that came to us and said, "Hey, we'll do the project. You know,
Hmm.
we'll buy it. We'll do long-term lease. We'll do the project."
Hmm.
And the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation board said, "No, we want this to be a community asset. So in the end, when this is up and running and functional and earning rental income, we want that to go back to the community, not to an outside group." So we the Copenhagen CDC turned down a number of offers for basically giving the project away, and
Oh,
those were tough decisions because
yeah.
it was like, here's a group that said, we've got the deep pockets to be able to do this project,
Right.
we can do it, and the CDC said, that's really nice, but no, we want
Uh-huh.
to be an equity partner in this. And so at the end of the day, it's a building that is restored. It's got these community uses, and this $19 million project belongs to the neighborhood
Yep.
CDC, and it's an asset for the CDC. And that's kind of another story, using that as this sort of core leverage, if you will. The CDC has been able to go on and raise some really significant funding for other projects in the greater Coppin Heights communities, including a historic lumber mill, a number of apartment buildings, renovating houses along an avenue called North Avenue, one of the main thoroughfares. Again, severely disinvested areas that
Hmm.
the CDC's used the Hebrew Orphan Asylum as, you know, I'm not a finance person, but they've
Yeah.
basically been able to come to the table with banks and lenders and partners and say, we've now got a real asset to put on the
Uh-huh.
table. Let's talk about this next project.
Yeah. Excellent. So is Baltimore Heritage gonna stay involved in the Rosemont neighborhood and kind of some way to see how it evolves, if there are any upcoming plans with it?
So we are Baltimore Heritage, not Greater Rosemont Heritage. But I
Right.
will say we our my board of directors did a new strategic plan about 3 years ago,
Mhm.
and baked into that plan is for Baltimore Heritage to stay involved in
Oh,
the
good.
Coppin Heights set of communities. So
Right.
yes, 100%.
Perfect. Awesome.
Again, 20 years
Yeah.
of this, lots of times that both Gary Rodwell and I would just sit there and shake our heads and throw up our hands and say, "Oh my gosh, is this?" You know, I cannot tell you how many people told us that it couldn't be done.
Hmm.
And so I just want to we're not heroes. Maybe we're actually below average students that we didn't listen to people. And for Baltimore Heritage, at least, we have had lots of long-term projects that have not ended successfully. We're not batting 1,000. I won't. I, I think we would not even be considered a pretty good baseball player if our batting average. But we do try to get involved in projects even when it looks like it's going to be an uphill battle. And this one, we were fortunate enough to come out on top.
Yep.
Again, lots of other ones, unfortunately, we did not end up in the same place.
Yeah, this is a great success story and a great example of how perseverance can really benefit and help preservation succeed. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me today, and
No, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
a true story of perseverance and community collaboration. As a site that always wanted to help the disadvantaged, unwell, or ill, it's able now to continue that mission in its new life. Thank you to Johns Hopkins, Baltimore Heritage, and all of you for watching.